I'm old school. It's all handwritten. I start on Sunday night on these charts. So it takes all week. We leave tomorrow. So when you leave on Friday, you have one less day. I laugh about it a little bit because I was on the practice field earlier this week, and I was standing next to Chris Fowler, who's also going to call the game. And he had his chart with him, except his was really nice. And it was all computerized, but somebody does it for him. Mine is all Josie's handwriting. And I'm proud to say, really, nobody can read it except me, you know? So, but I think when you're old school, I take pride in that because this is 22 years of doing it the same way. I just think I find something, I don't know, therapeutic about that to do it every week, the same way, every day is almost the same. And I don't know, hopefully it's a path to success. Prior to that, I did, part of my career was I was the analyst. So I did 12 years as the analyst. And I did the same thing, except I didn't use a chart because I didn't have to have, it was a different role. I did more of notes and study and all that. And I did that the same way. So when I went from analyst to play-by-play, I kind of had the same prep. I just kind of switched them a little bit. Same thing, but instead of like all handwritten notes on players and strategy, because that was my job, strategy, this is more about names and numbers and background.
And so you mentioned the fact that you were an analyst. I'm gonna jump back to your preparation in a second, but it strikes me that there aren't a ton of non-former player analysts anymore. That seems to be the domain purely of former athletes, either on the collegiate or professional level. What do you think about that, and how did that make you a better broadcaster that you got to fill that role?
Well, when I did it back in 1987, it was more common for broadcasters to have that role because in radio, you wanted to promote your broadcast team, right? Or your radio station, because you did more than just the games. So in my case, and the guy that I work with, Sonny Hirsch, we did a talk show every single day, Monday through Friday. So the games were more of a vehicle of how to promote the radio station and your show and your radio broadcast team, because you were part of this radio station every single day, right? 365 days out of the year, you had some role. So I was that's the reason why they made me the analyst. At the same time, right before I started, Larry King, he was an analyst with the Miami Dolphins. He handed that off to Hank Goldberg, who just recently passed away. So it was more common. A lot of the guys that are my age that are play-by-play guys now started as analysts. In fact, Eric Reed, who does the television for the Miami Heat, his first job with the Miami Heat was radio analyst. And then he became the play-by-play guy. They did a simulcast. So back then it was more common. It helped me so much because I was very well aware I was not a former player. So I would visit with every coach, and I had great coaches around me, right? It was the era of Howard Schnellenberger, who handed it off to Jimmy Johnson. So I had guys like Dave Wanstatt, Gary Stevens, Butch Davis, Joe Brodsky, giving me a master's degree in football, because I would spend most of my Tuesdays and most of my Wednesdays with those guys, and they were great with their time and their trust to tell me what the game plan was and to take it from coaching Swahili and put it into English. And then when Coach Johnson left and went on to the Cowboys, it became Coach Erickson. I had to kind of start all over again and explain to him, hey, look, I'm the guy. I have to see this game through your eyes. So help me see the game through your eyes. I don't want to be up there saying what I think. I want to be able to explain it through your eyes. So it was great with Coach Erickson, Coach Bretkowski, Tommy Tuberville was here, Sonny Lubick, and it just made me a better broadcaster because it taught me, one, really how to just be relentless in preparation. Two, how to be a better communicator. Because I got to take all the stuff they told me, right, in Swahili and turn it into English, so that I'm not all football talk. And I can't try to fool the audience with all kinds of technical football talk when I'm not a coach or player. So it taught me a better way to communicate. And then the third thing would be building trust. I think as a broadcaster, you've got to build trust. I do get a little offended today in two areas. One, I think a lot of people that are broadcasters just throw stuff out there. It's their opinion, right? There's nothing behind it. They don't go to games. They don't go talk to anybody. They just, hey, this is what I saw. This is the way it should be, without realizing the guys that are doing this are pouring hours and hours and hours of expertise into it. So, and then as far as the former players go, the one thing that fascinates me about the former players, and I think this is very positive, the guy I work with, Don Bailey, he works at it. And one of the things I recognized right away when that transformation was being made, and even into the talk show world, for example, Joe Rose, he would come to me and say, what do I need to do to get better? We have a guy on campus, Mark Tressman, who works on campus at the law school, who was a coach for the University of Miami, very successful NFL coach, Canadian Football League coach. When he was out of coaching, I hired him to do some radio work. And he would come in after his show was over, and much like a football coach, how do I get better? And so their mentality, the former players and former coaches, was always what they did in their field. They would come and say, well, give me a critique. How do I get better? Which is, pretty good. I like that. And I think the best guys, the best former players are the ones that take what they learn as football players or coaches, which always was, they're going to review a game, right? So now let's review a show. And my guy does that. Don Bailey does that a lot. So I have a lot of respect for it. I think probably is knocked some guys out like me. People that are traveling that path probably knocked them out of a position. But now there are other avenues, social media and all that stuff.
So for you, I mean, you had this opportunity as a very young person to get involved with the University of Miami. When you first started, I mean, you were kind of there at the ground floor of the success of the program, right? I mean, what was your attraction to be involved with the program? It hadn't been successful prior to that.
Well, I was born and raised in Miami. So I was raised probably 5 miles away from Hard Rock Stadium. Now, when I was a kid, nothing was there. Joe Robbie Stadium wasn't there. They had just built Calder Racecourse. In fact, that whole area over there on County Line Road, there was a time they thought that was going to be Disney World, way back in the 60s and early 70s. So I'm born and raised here. And my dad would take me to University of Miami games because the Dolphins were just starting. Plus, he would listen to the games, and they were on Friday night. And I just was, I don't know, enthralled with this sound that I heard of college football. And for the University of Miami games on Friday night, they probably didn't have big crowds. I know they didn't have big crowds, but they had this cannon shoot off, and you could hear the band, and you just hear the sound effects. And I thought, man, that sounds really cool. I really like this team. So I started following the University of Miami. I think my father took me to my first game. I was 7 years old. So I had this background in the University of Miami. I liked them as much as the Dolphins. And when I got my job at the radio station, I started in 79. I was in high school. I started as an intern, and I just worked my way up. I wanted to be in sports, but I had to prove myself in a whole bunch of other areas. Like, I stuffed envelopes. If I wasn't a good envelope stuffer, I wouldn't be here today. I had to stuff envelopes. I had to take carts. They called them carts, where they played the commercials on. They're plastic carts, and they had tape in them. I had to take those carts apart and redo the tape, put all the tape in the carts. I had to demagnetize them. What other jobs did I have? I guess worked like in I would show up at marketing events and hand stuff out, bumper stickers out. I did everything. So by the time 1983 came along, our radio station, WIOD, got the rights to the games, the football games. We didn't have basketball yet. So we had the rights to the football games. And there was a broadcast team of Sonny Hirsch, and they hired Tony Segreto, guy. Speaking of non-former players, he was a television anchor to be the analyst. So Tony was the analyst. And I was at the radio station working news and sports. So they made me the pregame guy, pregame host, pregame and postgame. That's how I started. Pregame host, postgame host. And in 1985, we got baseball. So they paired me with Sonny Hirsch. He was the play-by-play guy. And one of the games, he said, Miami was playing Florida State. I think we're halfway through the first season. And he said, and my role was just to add stuff, right? Add some color commentary, add some stats. And again, I went to Coach Frazier, at the time it was Brad Kelly, and help me with the scouting reports. So I'd have all these notes for the games. And Sonny said, Sonny was saying goodbye for a little while to take you for the next couple of innings. Here's Joe Zagacki. I'm like, what? What'd you say? And he just put his headphones down and walked away. That was his way of basically picking me up and throwing me into the pool of play-by-play. And that's how I started doing games. So basketball started up also in 85. So then they paired me with him in basketball. So in 87, the station management thought, this is pretty good. We want to keep this all in-house. And that's how I got the football. Did that answer your question? I can't remember what it was.
It did. Well, it's such a different world from today. I mean, now you have the Miami Hurricanes Sports Network. It's much more, I don't want to say corporate, but sounds like much more professionalized, and that it's not just a single station, trying to promote the team in-house, but now you're trying to project the brand of the university across the state. To go back to what you were asking about and all that, right? So yeah, that was a big deal for us to get the games. The University of Miami kind of bounced around the radio dial. They didn't really have a great flagship station. And once they got to WIOD, that was a big coup for the University of Miami, because WIOD at the time was, those call letters were as significant as any call letters in the country, like KMOX in St. Louis, WCAU in Philadelphia, WSB in Atlanta. These were major call letters, and they had the Dolphin games, right? So this was a big coup for the University of Miami to have a flagship station. And I think the management at the station, they liked me, even though I was young. I knew all this stuff about the and I was, gung-ho. I was there every day. I was the guy to get all the interviews. I was on the practice field the other day. Bernie Kosar was there, right? And Bernie is out there. There's some donors and some other people. And Bernie, he starts laughing, and he's going to introduce me. Hey, Joe Zagacki, let me tell you something. The first interview I ever did was with Joe Z, which is right. The first interview that Bernie ever did. It was actually almost one of my first interviews. But I suspected he was going to be really good that year. And I suspected he was going to win the job, even though Coach Snellenberger didn't announce it till right up by, the first week of the game, I think it was. But I said, I need to talk to Bernie Kosar. I just have a feeling about this. So that was kind of my introduction to Bernie and I go all the way back. He was 19 and I was 21. How about that? Pretty neat. So the broadcast at that time, how would you describe them? Were they more homerish? Were you guys clearly fans calling the games, or how would you describe it?
Sonny Hirsch, who was the play-by-play guy, he was from Miami Beach, much like me. He was born and raised here, but by 1983, Sonny Hirsch was a legend in Miami. He had done the University of Miami games in the late in the 60s, early 60s and early 70s. So fans are already familiar with him. Tony went to the University of Miami and was a major television star for, at the time, it was Channel 4, and they were a CBS affiliate. They just kind of flip-flopped in the early 90s, and so now it's Channel 6. But Tony was a major star in town in terms of anchors, and Miami, probably as big as it is today, was a little bit smaller then, even though it did have a big town feel. And I think the broadcast of any college team are always going to have, use the word homerism. So it's always going to be that way, because you're an advocate for the school. That's your job. You're supposed to see it through their eyes, their coach, their administration. Otherwise, it's not professional. I mean, not professional sports, it's college sports. Broadcast, I hope, we're professional, very professional. But your job is to be an advocate for the school and to be an ambassador for the school. And prior to where we have today, where every game is televised, back in the 70s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, really, it was your play-by-play guy and your play-by-play station. And that's why the play-by-play guys were so famous. Gene Deckeroff of Florida State just retired, but when he started, that was, the sweet spot of people listening on the radio. And Larry Munson for Georgia. I don't know if you're familiar with him, Larry Munson in Georgia. He was, we got the ball. The Dogs got the ball. The Dogs got the ball. We got the ball. And we lead at 35-30. But this is going to be a great one for the Dogs. It was all like that. I don't think we're that far. I think we're somewhere in the middle. We are going to advocate for the school. But, you get into the Southeastern Conference in the 70s, those guys were all in on their schools, but they were as well known as the head coach. And probably, in some cases, maybe even more well known. And that's who people wanted to hear from.
So, and I hate to keep jumping around, but just following the organic nature of the conversation. So today you have the Miami Hurricanes Sports Network. So it's fair to say that you're an employee of the University of Miami. Is that how you would describe yourself?
No, not really. So all the contracts are different around the country, right? Everybody falls into some different category. Some guys fall in the category of you work for the radio station. That's who's going to send you your check. Some work for the broadcast company, Learfield or Legends or whoever might control those broadcast rights. And some guys work for the school. Everybody's a little bit different. So every market is different. Every guy is different. I think the assumption is every play-by-play guy or radio guy works for the school. So it's a technicality. You don't work for the school. If you don't work for the school, you work with the school, and you probably have the approval of the school. So I have to be in line with the administration. I can't be out there going, hey, this is the way they should do it. My job is to see it the way they see it, be in line with them, be an advocate for the school, to be a good ambassador for the school, and work for the school in a first-class manner. I just think that you're supposed to have a great attitude for the school, and you're supposed to deliver a first-class product. And that means during the broadcast or any other time. When I walk out of my house and get in my car or go to the grocery store, I'm the voice of the Miami Hurricanes, right? So can't forget that responsibility. And it's one that I embrace. So far, so good with the school. And I just think that's kind of the way you have to do it.
And
you can't be the Lone Ranger,
Well, there are certainly some broadcasters who have different takes on that, I guess, right? Maybe some people have a local radio show. I know you used to do local radio. You still do. You'll join shows. But is it difficult for you? Would it be difficult for you to host like a daily show in addition to doing your role? Not only for the fact that it's incredibly taxing, but that you'd have to kind of watch yourself a little bit, right? And
Yes.
not get in trouble with what you're saying.
100%. I don't do them anymore. I used to do a radio show all the time, And now it's impossible. I don't think you could really find, there are very few play-by-play guys in any sport, college, NBA, NFL, that do a show. Very few. Locally, Jimmy Cephalo does the Dolphins and kind of is the anchor of a news show, but doesn't really give sports opinions. Michael Kay for the Yankees does a talk show and the television of the Yankees. I don't know how he does it. I find that, you use the word taxing, I would find it exhausting. But to your point, the more important point would be, a guy like Michael Kay in New York, different market, is going to have unbelievable support from the Yankees. He's getting paid by the Yankees, I think, on the Yes Network, but then doing a radio show. If you're going to do a talk show in today's environment, you really need great cooperation from both sides. And it's really hard to go down that path. If you're critical, you might be too critical in the eyes of the school and not critical enough in the eyes of the listener, or vice versa. It could be the other way. It could be fans go, man, why you're that's our team that you're getting after. So, it's a very fine line to walk for most play-by-play guys. It creates a lot of noise, and it's probably the safer route. And I'll do talk shows. I'll fill in. I won't do it every day. I'll, in a game, I'm not afraid if a guy's not playing well, there you have to say, well, he dropped the ball, right? People see that. But I also think there are ways to do it, especially at the college level, without crushing everybody. I think the one thing that I see is sometimes people want you to be critical, but what's enough? Sometimes it's never enough for them. Like, you want me to hit him with a hammer? Do you want me to hit him with a sledgehammer? What do you want me to hit him with? It's never good enough. And I think if a guy drops the ball and you say, he just dropped the ball and that was an important play, you got to make that play, I think that's good enough. What else are you going to say? The guy feels bad enough. What else could you possibly say, right? But for some people, it's never enough. And I just think if you know what, I have a card. I'll show you what I do. Go back to my prep. So here you go. See that?
Yeah. What does it say for?
Huh?
What does it say for us, for our listeners?
Just the facts. Just the facts. So I stick to the facts. Facts will always take you to a safe spot, right? So I just stick to the facts. I'm the guy that, all I'm doing is delivering the information. He drops the pass, he dropped the pass. If they're not running the ball well, they're not running the ball well. I can't, I'm not gonna sit there with a sledgehammer and say, well, gee, they should be, doing X, Y, and Z, but just the facts. But you're right about talk shows. It's a hard environment for play-by-play guys.
Well, we'll try not to get you in trouble on this show. It'd be extra interesting if we did, but we'll try not to. Back to your preparation, I noticed something in a picture that you'd posted on your Twitter page a few weeks ago of kind of your broadcast setup. And I'd never seen this with a broadcaster before. Maybe this is just because of my age, but you had an hourglass in front of you. Well, what's that about? An hourglass? Surely there has to be another way to do whatever that device is doing for you.
What do you think it's for?
I don't know. Well, let me ask this question. How long does the hourglass last?
90 seconds.
90 seconds.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. What does it do for you?
It reminds me to give the score.
There it is.
Yeah. It reminds me to give the score every 90 seconds because people are always tuning in and tuning out. So I probably give the score almost after every play or before every play. But if I don't, because maybe something else is going on, I have that hourglass in front of me and if the sand is out, I know to get the score. I better get, if the sand is out, then I know it's been longer than 90 seconds. If the sand is still running, I get the score and flip it. So if you tune in, most likely you won't go more than 90 seconds without hearing the time and the score. Because really the only thing that matters is the time and the score. And that's for football, basketball, and baseball. And the guy who taught me that was John Miller, the voice of the San Francisco Giants. He always has an hourglass with him. The guy who taught him, probably like, Red Barber used to have it, Mel Allen, all the old time guys. So in one way, I use it to remind me to give the score. And in another way, I kind of use it just to honor other broadcasters, the great broadcasters.
So I guess the hourglass is sort of emblematic of sort of the craft of broadcasting, right?
Yeah.
And a couple questions I have are about that. And we've been talking about that, but ultimately you wouldn't be able to do the craft of broadcasting if it wasn't for the business of broadcasting. If it wasn't making money and it wasn't, serving a purpose, you wouldn't be able to do your craft, at least in a way that would financially support you and allow you to do this. So tell us about those pressures between the craft and then the business side, and how do you kind of navigate that during a broadcast?
Well, for me, the craft is the fun part. That's it. And look, it's no secret we've had some tough seasons, right? So some people will say, how do you handle all that? If they lose a tough game and win. And so I can't really bring losing in my front door. If they lose a hard game, football, basketball, or baseball, it's going to stay in my driveway. It's kind of the deal I have with my wife. We made that deal a long time ago. But you'll be saying, well, what does that have to do with the craft? What it has to do with the craft is I always just go back to, now, is it going to bother me if they lose or whatever? Maybe, or win. I just go back to the craft. How do I call a better game? What do I have to do for the next game? Because they come at you pretty fast, especially when basketball season comes along. It comes fast. But to me, the fun part is how do I call the perfect game? Can I call a perfect game? So I just always work the craft, the time and score, the hourglass, right? I'm a voracious reader. I like to read mysteries and spy novels. I like to read guys that describe characters. So I might read a book and a character could be described as, he's 6'4" with short blonde hair, and he had biceps that look like grapefruits and big broad shoulders. I'm like, I think I'll use that. I don't know if it's plagiarism or not, but I think, I think I'll use that. It's a good way to describe a guy. So can I add that? Because my job is to describe. You can't see what I'm talking about, right? So I got to describe it. And so that's working the craft. Looking at all this, mumbo jumbo that's on my board. It's stats, but, so-and-so's from Woodrow Wilson High School. Oh, okay, named after a president. It might be pertinent for me to say, tackle was made by so-and-so. He went to Woodrow Wilson High School, the 29th president of the United States, right? That is working the craft. Which direction are they going? Left to right. The grass is really, an emerald green. It's an oasis for the players, right? Work the craft. So during the week, how can I keep working the craft? If I can keep working my craft, making it sound better, what happens? Do I get more listeners? Do I get more people that are intrigued by it? Do I get more advertisers? Because ultimately it comes down to advertisers. So we have lots of advertisers and they always want more. So you got to give them more. So not only calling the game and trying to work that part, all the stuff that comes with calling a game, down, distance, time, score, who's got the ball, where is it, geography, play-by-play is geography, any sport, where's the ball, who has it, where are they going, pinpoint the ball, right? It's geography. Business side, now I got to sell. I got to sell a Cadillac, I got to sell a Lexus, I got to sell a restaurant, got to sell a grocery store, whatever it is, you got to make it sound like it is the best product of all time, every time. You can't just be, Williamson Cadillac, toss it to the side. That puts something into it. And so,
because for those companies, that's the most important part of the broadcast for them.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Right. They're tuning in. They want to hear their tagline. They want to hear what they're, if it's a Labor Day sale, Thanksgiving sale. They're investing money. They're investing money in you. Ultimately, I'm the one who has to deliver it, right? So you got to deliver it the right way. You can't just be, oh, darn, this is a nuisance. No, you got to find a way to put it in the broadcast with a lot of gusto where it's not overwhelming the audience where they're going, oh God, another one? Because part of the craft is you got to let the broadcast breathe somewhere along the line. Crowd noise, band, all the elements that make up college football, we got to hear those also without bombarding everybody with everything else. So hopefully we're able to do that. The University of Miami is a great product, and it's a product that people want to be associated with. So I don't think we have a problem in that area. And I know you want to get maybe, you're looking down the road of, well, what about radio? Radio has always been there. I had always been there. And I have this feeling that radio could go just by this slogan. We were here before you, we'll be here after you. I don't see, radio changes in a different way, but, and maybe for the younger people, maybe they don't listen on the radio, maybe they listen on the phone, but it's still audio. It falls into the audio content area. And so there's a place for it. And I suspect that because radio is here before me and will be here long after me, it's going to continue to thrive.
Do you have a sense of what a successful broadcast looks like for your network? Do you guys have like targets for listeners, or is it based on a rating? Is it based on, does that even matter to you guys? I mean, how does that work?
No, I think the ratings matter. I think you see a bump in the ratings. We do have a network that covers the state of Florida. So that's a little more of a challenge to get your network because there's a lot of competition. Got Florida and Florida State, South Florida and Central Florida. They're all vying for these smaller radio stations. The radio business has been consolidated, right? So you've got Odyssey, who we work for. You've got Clear Channel, and you might have 2 or 3 other big companies. So you're trying to put together your network. It's a bit of a challenge because these corporations now, some of them want money for their time. Some of them will trade. We'll take your game for the time. So it's all on an individual basis. The network will judge success on their own. I think probably, well, let me rephrase that. The common denominator will be this. Everybody's going to have a budget on football. Can you make your budget and more through sales? That's really going to be it. That's going to be judging success. And I think it's harder to figure out your listeners for a variety of reasons. One, games aren't at the same time. NFL is a little bit easier. You probably look at ratings on an NFL station and go, okay, hey, look at that, 1 o'clock. We got a big bump. Every Sunday at 1 o'clock, we got a big bump. A little more difficult with college. We play at 12, we play at 3, we play at 7, right? Different windows. And the streaming, it's different for everybody. For us, there's no paywall. So we can stream our games nationwide. We can look at that and see what kind of listenership you're getting streaming. You could make the argument, well, is the streaming taken away from forcing people to listen on the radio? So I guess you just got to combine them all together.
And are you involved in that sales side at any point? Are you brought in sometimes to help?
Oh yeah, all the time. People want to hear from the guy that's associated with the program. Who better to sell it? right, than the guy that sees it every day. So yeah, that's a big part of the off season. I love that. I love that part. And I think it's again, that's part of maybe that's your NIL, right? Your name, image, and likeness becomes your voice. And some people will like it. Maybe some people don't. That's a hard business. But yeah, I'm a part of the sales operation. I'm always willing to go on calls. I do think that there are a lot of people that are interested in hearing it from my side. I don't think it's a prerequisite for them to buy. Some will buy the station, some will buy the product, some will buy football, some will buy, it's an emotional buy. You never know. There are a variety of reasons why people will get involved. We just hope they'll buy. But yeah, I get involved in the sales side. I'm probably involved in every aspect of the broadcast, from the production, what goes in the pregame, writing the game opens. I'm probably involved in every aspect of it.
And so obviously football is the main focus, and I know you're preparing for a big game here against Texas A&M, so we really appreciate your time. We'll let you go here in a second. Football is probably your main focus in the fall, right? But then you've got basketball season that starts, and you do some baseball. Tell us about those two other sports. I mean, they're probably not as important financially to the network, but tell us about how that kind of fits into your calendar and how much time and attention you give them.
Yeah, well, when basketball hits, which is November 7th. So somewhere in October, you start preparing for basketball. And so it's all football. And then all of a sudden, maybe that half an hour to an hour where you're laying on the couch watching an NFL game, that goes to basketball. And maybe that you get done with football on a Wednesday night at 10 o'clock, and maybe check out that show that was on no Netflix tonight. We're gonna go do basketball. And then when it hits, it crosses over. But I find it to be exhilarating, to be honest with you. It's exhausting and exhilarating. So last year, this always happens right at Thanksgiving, because they have these tournaments. So last year it was, let me think, drive to Orlando, basketball on Thanksgiving Day, and basketball the day after Thanksgiving, fly to North Carolina Friday night, football on Saturday, fly back after the game back to Orlando Saturday night, do the basketball game Sunday, go home Sunday, home on Monday for football stuff, fly Tuesday to Penn State. So now you're on the airplane doing football stuff. Do the basketball game on Wednesday at Penn State, and then fly home and do more football stuff. So that's the kind of way it goes in November. Pretty cool. I think it's, they just collide. So this year, the dilemma is, I haven't figured it out yet, is we play Clemson in football, and there's basketball on Saturday and Sunday in Connecticut. So I can't make the Saturday game. So the question is, how do I get there for Sunday? Or do we have someone else do it? To be determined. We'll see. And the tournament this year, I think that's the tournament. So it's not so bad. But the games cross over during the week. You just got to find time. And have to give them equal amount of attention and find time. Basketball, listen, we had a run to the Elite Eight last year. It was as much fun and as much intensity as I've ever had in broadcasting. And I've had some really, really intense seasons. But the basketball caught fire last year. And as it catches fire, you're doing the NCAA tournament. And the tournament also leads you to a different audience. You're in the middle of the day. Right, first game was, I think, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I can't remember, but you're in drive time. You're in a different audience. People are stuck on the Palmetto, and these games are coming down to the last second. And in basketball, I think we went from middle of February till the end of March, right? Where almost every game was some kind of pitter patter of your heart, jittering and jolting of the heart. They're all coming down to the last second, so they're fun. They're a great challenge. They're nerve-wracking. And I think, basketball probably doesn't have the same audience as football. However, I'll say this for both basketball and baseball. When they get to games where the money's on the table, the big games, postseason, or playing a rival, it's not University of Miami basketball or University of Miami baseball. It's University of Miami program. The fan base is all in on it, right? They might be more hardcore football fans, but now we're playing for some kind of championship. Oh, they're all in. That's one of the things I really do. One of the things I love about the Miami fan base is if it's big, they're all in on it.
So just a couple more questions. I know you're preparing and when I was in college, I actually got to do a lot of different play-by-play for the University of Alabama where I went to school, and I got to travel with the team a lot. Do you get to travel? You get to travel with the team as well. You're embedded with the team on a lot of these trips, right?
All of them. All of them.
So tell us what that dynamic is like, because you're a broadcaster, you aren't a coach, but you're literally sitting in proximity to these folks. And you've already said you try not to say anything negative or anything like that, but you are commenting, and you never know how somebody's mom's going to take it, or how do you navigate all those sort of interpersonal elements of traveling with these folks?
Something, I don't want to come off as, bragging about it, but I've never had a problem. I've always been just as honest as could be. If I said something that was critical and a mom and dad or a player had something, that they usually, the way that goes is they hear from someone else. And by the time it gets to them, it's worse than it was. But I've always just been, okay, here's what was said, and look them right in the eye. And let's talk about it. Here's what I said. If you disagree with it, you can tell me why. And the next game, I'll bring it up. So that's one way. The other way is, I don't think that in my career, I've ever burned anybody. I've never taken what they've said out of context. If they said off the record, off the record. And I've just always believed in building a great amount of trust. I sit with Coach L, and I relish this. Basketball is a smaller traveling party, but I'll sit, he invites me into his meetings. I go to dinner. I sit right there at dinner. I sit in his meetings. I watch him put the game plan together and the strategy together. I think he respects that I'm there to take, some guys could go on the road and go, hey, you know what? It's a new city. Let's go out to dinner. I always go, it's work. For me, it's work. What can I do to make it tomorrow better? Right? So I sit there with Coach L, go over the game plan, so I know what he's doing. When the game is on the line, I can say, okay, I'm going to pick up some nugget. I'm going to put it in my own words. I'm not going to betray his trust. And I think after we've been together 11 or 12 years, he knows I'm not going to betray his trust. I've never, Coach Johnson, when he was here, same thing. All of them just don't betray their trust. I'm pretty confident I know how to put what they're saying into proper words. I'm not going to go over the line. I'm not going to go scoop anybody. I'm not going to put it online. I'm going to use it at the right time. If I'm trying to think of an example last year in basketball, it was very funny. Coach L put in a strategy on him. Defending, the other team was going to throw the ball in, right? Baseline, out of bounds plays are big. So he says, look, here's what I want you to do. You're going to jump up and down when they inbound. But you're going to count to 5. When you count to 5, jump to the right, and they're going to throw you the ball. I promise you. So I used it. I thought it was appropriate. I said, I wouldn't be surprised if, I forget who it was, Charlie Moore jumps up and down and counts to 5 to try to force a turnover. And sure enough, boom, it worked. So what does that do? It shows great credibility to the coaching staff. They nailed it, right? They just absolutely nailed it. So I think that's important. Now, in terms of players, the funny thing with players is this: the only one who gets older is me. Players always stay the same. They're between 19 and 22. And I think that, and my partner, Don Bailey, is really good at this. So I've learned from him. With players, I don't need to ask them, hey, are you ready to go? Of course they're ready to go. With me, it's always on the plane, hey, how you doing? Blah, blah, blah. It's very casual. But more than anything, you just become a mentor. You're there for advice. You're there for, like, if they didn't play well and you're stuck next to them, nobody feels worse than they do. It's, you know what? You've got 45 catches this season. Next week is going to be just important. Just go back to practice and do the same thing. You're there to be, I look at it this way. I've got a daughter who's 28 years old. I'm supposed to be the old one. I'm supposed to be the adult in the room. So act like it, right? I'm not Joe Fan. If I'm there with a player, act like it. Act like you're an adult. Talk to them like you're an adult. How can you help them? That's what they're there for. They're there to get an education. So my interaction with most of the players is, how can I help them? How can I help them with your education? And I don't think this is talking out of school, but Jordan Miller for basketball had a really nice season. At first, he was struggling, but he had a nice season. And as the season went on, I got to know him. But we were just, I'm going to find out things about those guys that I can use in my broadcast. Sam Wardenberg, he likes to read Dan Brown books, going back to working the craft, right? Sam Wardenberg's at the free throw line. He's shooting 75%. Sam loves to read Dan Brown books, and right now he's on chapter 75 or whatever, all right? Whatever the Dan Brown book was. I think that adds some personal element to what they're doing. Jordan Miller became a player who fans fell in love with. Very articulate, really smart, got the game-winning basket against Boston College. We were at the NCAA tournament, and I'm at the shoot-around, and I'm walking around because I just walk around when they shoot. And the ball comes off the rim, and it bounces to me, and I flip it over to Jordan Miller. And I said, you know what? You'd be good at radio or TV. Let's figure out if I can help you. So we get to Chicago, and the local TV stations are there. And I go to each one of them. I said, you know what? When the season's over, maybe you guys could use Jordan Miller as like an analyst. Give him a chance. He could talk about the Heat. When the Heat go to the playoffs, maybe you could bring in Jordan Miller. And now the reason I knew it would work is way back in the 90s, going back to business, my business partner was Jim Mandage. And we had a TV show that we sold on Channel 33 called Sports Wrap. And I would bring players in, or we'd bring people in as analysts, give them a chance. So Ruthie Polinsky from Channel 6 took the idea, and she brought Jordan Miller in, put him on television on Sunday night, and he was their analyst. So that's my job. How do I interact with players? I didn't do it because I need Jordan Miller to be nice to me on the road. I did it because he's a great kid. He studies hard. I see something in him that is positive. I see, he got this great smile, really smart and articulate. And I said, I think you could be on TV. So he did it, and he did really well. And then a couple of weeks went by, and I saw him, and I said, look, now let me tell you how I can help you. Don't stop at being an analyst. When you're done with basketball, you know what? Maybe you'll be the news reader, the anchor. What's the word? What could be out there for you? Don't just narrow it to what you just did. So I see it as, I'm the adult. Act like it. How can I help them? Can I open a door for them? There was nothing else involved in it other than great kid, and maybe I can help them. And that's not the first guy that I've done that for in some other field. That make any sense?
It does. It makes a lot of sense but that's something that most people don't even probably realize. They just think, well, you're just like me. You're just up there. You're just watching the game and calling it. But you have all this other context because you're literally embedded with the athletes. I mean, that's a
You know
remarkable.
that Isaiah Wong likes to have, what was it? Bagel, had a bagel and he put ketchup on his bagel. Now I have to go back and ask him. He has some weird element that for breakfast. So you find these things out and they're good with it. I think it makes them more human, and it gets, it could be what they like to eat. It could be their relationship with their mom and dad. It could be what they're studying, what they just studied. It could be anything, but it's a story. We're ultimately in the storytelling business, right? That's what all of it is. So you got to tell a story, tell their story. Usually their stories are really good.
Two last questions. Since you brought up your TV show that you Sports Wrap, which I remember being on local TV, you referred to you and Jim Mandich as partners. So you, in that regard, were not only a broadcaster, you were a business guy. Can you tell us about that process and what the process of selling a show was at that time, and what ended up happening with it and how things have evolved?
Well, he was an economics major at the University of Michigan. He was a pretty smart dude. He said, Josie, we can do a TV show. We were doing a radio show together. I said, what do you mean? He said, this radio show that we can do the same thing on television. So he had one idea of it. I had another idea. And he said, well, we got to sell it. I said, okay. So we went and we met with the general manager of Channel 33. Jim did the research and found out at that time, the most watched hour of television was Sunday night at 9:00. Most TVs were turned on at 9:00 on Sunday nights. That's when families were gathering. So we took Sunday night at 9:00, 2 hours before the news. There were all these sports shows on at 11:30. We went on at 9. And then we sold it. And again, we went out to people that we knew, made it an emotional buy. And then once it started, we got the ratings every Monday morning. So we could go to our advertisers and say, look, here we are locally. Here's what the Sunday night movie on ABC got. Here's what the TV stations got. Here's what we're getting. So we're a worthwhile buy. And we priced it. Now we also, we got an education not only in ratings, but we were also responsible for the crew. So we had a lot of overhead in order to make money. And we had to build the set, this and that. But we did. We did it for 6 years. And we sold it. We went out every week. We had to call on our clients. We had a whole thing set up. Shula's was one of our sponsors. So this was great because before the show, we would take our clients or our guests to dinner at Shula's. Now, we had people from Wayne Huizenga to Don Shula to the entire Chicago Bulls coaching staff out to dinner. And we had to figure out how to do all of this. My wife, we made her a producer. She would go and pick up all of our guests. She had the entire Chicago Bulls coaching staff, the entire Los Angeles Lakers coaching staff in our car, and she would bring them to dinner. We used everybody we knew. We hired Kevin Lockery, we hired Dave Dombrowski, and that gave us an entree into what? All these teams were coming into the city. Every week they were coming in. So we made all these connections, came and did the show at Channel 33. Eventually, I got a job with Channel 4. So Channel 4 said, hey, we like what you're doing over there. Can you do that for us over here? And it just made more sense for me financially to go do that. Jim continued for another year, and then we branched off into other areas. By the way, it was called MZM Productions. We had a TV show. We had a Sunday morning radio show. We had, if you were on an airplane and picked up the American Airlines magazine, and you might have seen America's Best Sports Bars, an ad, that was us. We had all of that. What else did we have? We had University. Ultimately, we ended up owning the University of Miami coaches shows for a couple of years. So we branched off into a lot of things. And Jim then had the Miami Dolphins Touchdown Club, which was really an offshoot of Sunday Night Sports Wrap. Instead of it being televised, it was just inside a bar. We did Monday night shows at bars and restaurants. Again, there were no cameras or anything. We did a show inside the restaurants, and it was all his financial brain working. So yeah, that, and then unfortunately he got sick and passed away. So I lost my business partner.
That was a big loss. He was a amazing voice in the market. Do you think things have changed a lot too locally? I mean, now you talk about consolidation in media. Do you think it would be possible with audience shifts and local TV not being as strong as it was at one time? Do you think it would be possible to sell a show like that in today's world, or were they just rather run Seinfeld reruns?
Yeah, easier for them to run a movie or a Seinfeld. I don't even think they would take our call, to be honest with you. Now, we had a lot of negotiation. They had a general manager at the time that was, you know what, let me try this. And he was, I tell people we were the best damn sports show before the best damn sports show ever came on the air, which was the title of the show, not that it was actually the best damn sports show.
on Fox Sports, right? Yeah.
But probably not. No, I think that they wouldn't take a chance on it. It wouldn't give them, or the other side would be they would just charge you so much money it would be impossible to even break even. I don't know how you would break even with the sponsors. And since the market where we live now is so much bigger and more corporate, the market is more corporate. I don't know that we could get to the people that would need to get to, the decision makers, to advertise. At the time, these were big corporate people that we were dealing with: Ryder, Heineken, NCL. But we had relationships with all the CEOs, so we were able to get to them. Tony Burns, I knew Tony Burns because of the University of Miami and this being a personality in town. And Jim, you knew they would take your call. Now I don't even think they would take your call today. In fact, they probably don't even live here. But you had CEOs that lived here. Sports Authority, the CEO of Sports Authority, nobody could get to him. We made one call and got to him. So we had Sports Authority, Norwegian Cruise Line, Heineken, Ryder. Those are four major players. Another one, I can't remember, but those were four major players. Oh, in addition to car dealers, Maroney, which was AutoNation. We had local car dealers, but it was right about the time Gary Frymarth Chevrolet and Phil Smith, they were all merging into AutoNation, which was owned by Mike Maroney. Mike Maroney took our call all the time. He and Mad Dog were great partners, business, friends. So it was five major CEOs that you could sit down in front of and go, look, this is our show. This is what we think it's worth. This is what we can deliver. This is what you will get out of it. And here are all the price points. I don't think you could do that today. But for me, it was great because I can use all of that stuff today, somehow, some way.
So let's end on this then. So obviously you get the great benefit of being able to focus on the craft. And we've also learned how involved you are on the business side. Where do you think, and this is a big question, but on the local level and then on the national level, where do you think sports media is going? Do you think it's going in a positive direction? Do you think it's going in a splintered direction? Kind of give us a sense of where you think it's all headed.
Yeah, I wish I had a good answer on that. I'm not sure. I am along for the ride. It is much different than it was because you have all these podcasts. I don't know, all these things that are filling smaller. I'm not sure who has time to read or watch, to listen or watch all of this stuff. I do think that we are headed for something bigger, and maybe this ties in where college athletics is right now. Right, we've got the Big Ten expanding, and SEC expanding, and the ACC trying to hold together. Well, whenever the next explosion happens, it has to affect all of us, right? It's going to mean something, either ESPN's getting bigger, Fox is getting bigger. Those two, I know it's not directly answering your question, but the sidebar of that is ESPN and Fox are driving all of this, right? They're driving all of it. Now, are they companions or are they competitors? Because I'm not sure. I thought they were in it together. But now I think, well, maybe they're ESPN lost the Big Ten. So now these guys are going after each other, right? Well, how does that affect radio or whatever? My thought would be, because I'm always trying to look forward, my thought would be, if they're smart in the local radio industry, wait a minute. If these guys keep getting bigger, and you're telling me that the University of Miami is going to be in a situation where we're going to play Clemson more often, we're going to play, okay, it's going to affect the scheduling, right? What they want, what the TV partners want is what? Content and better games, right? Well, if they're going to create better games, then that create better content for us, right? Now, again, not directly answering your question. I'm looking at how's it going to affect me. Better game, better content, better advertisers. That's one way. What's going to happen to radio and consolidation and all of that? They're up against it. I don't know. I think they've gotten too big, to be honest with you. Okay, I'll say this. It needs to be more localized. Whether big companies watching over you or whatever, they need to put their assets and make things more localized. You can't be telling people in Miami how to run Miami. It's just too complicated. This is a unique market, and it's got to sound like Miami. Philadelphia needs to sound like Philadelphia. It can't be all cookie cutter. Texas needs to sound like Texas. That would be my opinion. They're not going to listen to it, but I'm afraid this consolidation, and with artificial intelligence, they can just keep dissolving jobs, right? Now, whether that means, I just don't know how you do a sports show on Miami from Chicago or wherever home base is going to be. Miami, it's got to sound like Miami.
Well, I guess you started to see that.
Philadelphia.
You started to see that in the Olympics, where because of COVID, it was the broadcasters had to be remote, and the fear is that maybe people learn from that, and but it would be difficult for you to do your job remote, would it not be? How could you call a game in Miami? That would be, how would you call a game in Miami?
We did it during COVID, we did, but it wasn't any good. I mean, maybe people didn't know. Go all the way back to working the craft. There are a bunch of things that might go wrong in a game that they'll never know. Only I will know. I'll be the only one that knows it. And they'll say, what are you punching yourself? Well, inflection was wrong, or I didn't see the ball, or whatever. We did a game off the TV, Miami and Virginia Tech. Mark Pope catches a pass over the middle. He's got it. Well, I say he's got it. He's going to go for a touchdown, except I don't know what yard line he's at, because the TV camera squeezes in on it. So I can't say, Pope's got it at the 45, he's at the 40. It's a drag race to the end zone. He's at 25, 20, 15. All I see is Pope. So I'm kind of like in the dark on it, making it up. Pope's got it. He's going to try to take it all the way to the end zone. It's a, one man to beat. But I don't tell anybody what yard line. He's into the end zone, touchdown. But I don't tell anybody what yard line he's on. If that's okay with, people think that's okay, well, bigger bosses, that's the sacrifice. And I guess we have to live with it down the road. But I know this from a pure broadcast standpoint, basketball, can't see the corner. Is it a 3? I guess it's a 3. You have to somehow change your vocabulary, which is a big part of broadcasting anyway. I hope we don't ever go back to that. It doesn't work. Maybe the listener doesn't know, but I tend to think, don't try to fool the listener, because they'll figure it out. They're going to know. And our job Okay, they move us around. Okay, we're at games along the same lines. They are moving you farther and farther away from midcourt or the 50-yard line.
I
Right? It's
noticed.
really
I noticed your Hard Rock broadcast position. I noticed that from the photo, you're kind of what, like the 25 or 30, kind of at a little bit of an angle.
25 or 30. That would be a luxury. How about corner of the end zone?
Okay. Oh, geez.
Not even between the goal line, corner of the end zone. And I don't want it to sound like whining, but you're supposed to hit a bullseye. I'll accept that challenge any day, anytime. I'm supposed to hit the bullseye. Except now you're either trying to hit the bullseye watching it on TV, or now, at this ridiculous angle. And so the ball is coming out of the east end zone or going that way. It's depth perception. You can't really see where it is. You got to get these super binoculars to try to zero in on where the ball is and look at it between the hash marks and then kind of go parallel and see if you got it the right way. But when that happens fast, good luck. It's not like I'm a writer who goes, oh, wait a minute, let me delete. You get one shot at it.
And maybe this is old information, but you don't use a spotter, right?
No.
And so tell our audience what a spotter is. And I mean, that's pretty common practice for a broadcaster to use a spotter.
So you can see my chart. I don't know if anybody else can see the chart, right? So someone would stand over your right or left shoulder. They would hover and they'll point. They'll watch the game like you. And so they'll point, they will have a system. Maybe the first one is who carries the ball. Second one is a tackle, whatever the system is. I don't know. I don't use a spotter because if he's wrong, then I'm wrong. So if I'm going to be wrong, then I'll be wrong all by myself. So I don't use a spotter. I just watch it myself. I try to memorize as many names as possible. And I can see who makes the tackle. I don't really know. I don't need them. And right. And plus he puts his finger on there. What if it's halfway in between? And then what is it? I have to have it fast. So I should know it. I know my own team. I should have it. Now, every now and then, with these new angles, a guy gets twisted around, can't see his number. People always think it's the name. I never, whether they have names or not, doesn't bother me. I don't care. I need to see the number. So sometimes it gets twisted around, the jersey gets rolled up. An 18 might look like a 16. So then the next thing is what? What are you going to do next? Put you on the spot. The next thing is this.
Oh, yep.
They have long hair.
Uh-huh.
They wear an arm, elbow pad.
Right.
What do they have? What will identify them? With my team, it could be, you pick up on how they run, right? The size, shape, how they run.
Right.
So if you got to guess, you got a pretty good chance you'll guess right. Now I probably jinxed myself. So I hope I didn't jinx myself. My hit rate is, I got a pretty good hit rate. I'll judge it. Believe me, when the game is over, I'll go back and watch to see but every now and then you miss it. And then you got to just, live with it, figure it out. That you're trying to throw a perfect game. And that's part of trying to find a perfect game. Hopefully you don't blow it at the big moment. So sometimes you just got to wait to see who it is. If you can't see their number, can't see some other identifying thing around them, can't see their name, well then you just got to wait.